So, what I really want to talk about today is sales, but like the illogical nature behind them and how I want to talk about like how that impacts your mindset, what that looks like in our industry. I want to talk about how to use data for that. But ultimately, like what I want to say here as like a starting point that I think is so important. And I feel like we all know, but we kind of forget when we like go about our day and our sales process and setting up our funnel and all of that, which is that people do not buy from a place of logic. We do not, right? Like as humans, I don't mean like people as in other people. I mean like all of us, right? Buy almost entirely from an emotional place. I think especially something like coaching or high-end services or whatever, like it's typically not so logical where it's like, I have this problem, you have this solution, I buy this thing. Like, yes, but businesses are built on problem and solution. And I think that's important to say too. So it's not to say abandon that. It's just to say like there's usually more to the story that ultimately like triggers us buying, that ultimately brings that across the finish line, right? Whether we buy or don't buy, right? It's not just to say it's buying is illogical. It's also to say like sometimes the not buying is too, right? Because it can feel like, well, I have this thing and it's so logical. It makes so much sense. Why would someone not buy this? Right. And so buying and not buying can be from that emotional and illogical place. And I think it's really helpful to name that because if not, we can get so wrapped up in that in our business and feel like we're missing something or we're doing something wrong or we haven't quite like nailed it because we think it's so logical. Actually, it's so funny. This was not even on purpose, but I recently sent out an email to my list and I was saying like, to me, logically, the fact that everyone on the planet with an online business has not bought Measure and Maximize yet makes no sense. Like to me, I'm like, that is literally the smartest, best investment you could possibly have for your business. Like the fact that everyone has not been like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Like, of course I need data in my business. That's the only thing I should be basing my buying off of. Okay, great. I'll buy that. So logically, at the price point it's at with the results it gives you with what it can create in your business, blah, 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 blah. Like logically, it makes no sense to me that everyone that's ever heard about it hasn't purchased it. And we are not making logical purchasing decisions a lot. So anyway, I asked my audience, like, if you haven't bought it, reply and tell me why. Like, I just want to hear your reasoning. Like, no hard pitch for me, but like, just tell me why. And I got some amazing feedback that was so, so, so useful. I'm so grateful for everyone who responded. And most of it, not all of it, most of it was emotional. Like, I'm overwhelmed by data. I'm not sure if I'm at the right place in my business and not necessarily from like a logical state, but more from like an emotional state of like, is this too far along for me? I might be behind. I might get confused, right? Like there were so many things and it was just so helpful to be like, yeah, this makes sense, right? It's not super logical. And so that can help, I think, because if not, we can stay so stuck in this sales place of like, oh, but I have a good solution and they're not buying it. And so then we can make it personal. Hi, hello, Tao. Thank you for being here. Right. We can make it so personal. It can be like, oh, well, if logically Measure and Maximize is the best thing out there and everyone should be buying it and they're not, something's wrong with me. Right. I suck, people don't like me, whatever. Like there's such an easy spiral to go down. And like that is not true. And this is why I love data, because data takes it out of being personal and it maps for you the illogical thought process that sometimes happens with our audience. So I'll give you some examples of that. But like what I really want to kind of like paint the picture of here is like why most people buy is illogical. And so it can feel really hard to track it, understand it, because it's coming from this place that does not operate based on logic. And what data can do is still help you look at that and track it, which is really, really important. Hey, Jess. Yes, so easy to make it personal. 100%. Hey, Steph. So example of this, right, is like one of my clients in her funnel, like so many people add to cart and don't check out on her sales page. This happens. Like, I think I can actually think of more than one client this has happened with for sure. So what that tells me is it is more of an emotional thing. It's not that they don't see the value. It's not that they don't understand why it's a good offer. It's not that they haven't like been educated on the offer, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's probably that they have an objection. It's that there's something emotional that's standing in the way. Maybe we like didn't appeal to them in the way that truly makes that land or creates urgency or whatever, but it's an emotional component when it looks like that, right? And so that's really helpful to see, or like maybe for another client, it's like people get really, really far in their thing and they maybe even have like a ton of clicks on like calls with them or something. And maybe even a bunch of people start an application, but then don't finish it. Okay, well, it's probably not super logical. Like, yes, it could be something logical, like, is your application really complicated? Whatever. But even that is still emotional in some ways, right? It's like, oh, I got overwhelmed here, so I stopped, right? It's not like, oh, I just must finish this application and it's that simple. And then I will submit and then I will, or maybe I like got in my head and I think like this person will think my application shit and they won't take me. Like, it's almost always something else emotional. But it's always so hard to guess and pinpoint what that is, especially when we're so close to our product or our service. It's so hard to not like, take that so personally or try to apply logic to it. But again, data is sort of the bridge to me between what is logically happening and what are these like illogical emotions that come up in our sales process. And I cannot tell you how important I think that is. I'm going to get into some other things about the illogical nature behind making more sales, especially how that shows up in our industry, because I think that's really important too. And I want to share some stuff that I think data confirms around that. But before we move into that, I just want to like land this plane here kind of thing, which is like, there are going to be pieces of your sales process and of your audience behavior that does not make sense, is not based on logic, is completely based on the emotional way in which we buy. And right, if you can track that, if you can track your funnel, if you can look at the data, you can get a better handle on what that might be and where that might be getting people stuck in your process so that you can apply strategy to it. Because I think that's what can happen is we think, okay, well, if it's totally illogical and emotional, then it's not strategic and I can't apply strategy to it. And that's not true either, right? It's just, you have to have something that shows you what that is, because if not, your brain is going to make shit up. Like Jess said, it's so easy to make it personal. So if you don't have a way to look at this, you're always going to personalize it, right? It's always going to come back to you. And that's really hard to be strategic around. Trust me, right? Like, if you're like, well, I'm the problem, I don't know, like they just must not like me. How do you strategically solve that? It's not even a problem to solve. Do you know what I mean? Like, my audience doesn't like me is almost never real. And it's definitely not like a realistic problem to solve. And so this just brings you back to the strategy of it instead of swimming in the soup of how much we suck or what we're doing wrong or whatever. It's like, I know my audience is probably going to have an illogical pieces to the buying process. And I know that I have a way to actually look at that so that I can make the right decisions, handle my business strategically, all of that, right? Jess, hey, Luce, Jess said you strategically solve that one with therapy. Amen, right? It's like you don't solve it through your funnel and you don't solve it through your business. And I think that is so important. So thank you for saying that, Jess. Like, yes, there is a strategic way to solve that. It's probably therapy and it's not necessary. I mean, therapy is necessary. I don't mean it like that, but I'm saying it's like you being like, people don't like me. It's not like a necessary problem to solve to make your funnel better. Like that is like, those don't fit together. Like one is a personal problem, one is a business problem. We need to separate the two and figure out what that is. Shantae said, I agree with what you're saying. My question is, how would you guide someone who feels exhausted having to overcome objections around the industry as a whole, especially in light of the past few years and the shift we've seen with buying behavior and the longer timeline that's taking? Is the soft context for the conversation feel pretty clear? Oh no, happy to answer it. So like basically just feeling exhausted, having to keep having the objection conversation. I mean, Honestly, I would just say like sometimes I would look at what's under it. Like, why does that feel exhausting? Because I think what's true is there's like a massive trust gap in our industry right now. And so I think anyone selling has to be willing to close that right now. I think I've shared this a ton on live streams recently, but for the vast majority of my clients, I've been saying, how are you solving the trust gap? How are you solving the trust gap? How are you like, right? Like it's just a thing. And so if you're feeling really exhausted by it, I wonder if it's also feeling personalized in some way, because that's what I typically find. Like when something like that, where I'm like, oh, I don't want to say this again or whatever. I'm like, what am I making this mean about me? Like, how am I taking this personally that I feel like there's a trust gap or whatever? Like that's something I would look at. And then also I would look at, oh, let's see. It is just a thing. Yeah, totally. We can talk about it more. But the other thing I would look at too is like, okay, so like, am I personalizing that? And then also like, am I just saying the same thing and it's not working? And that's why I'm frustrated too. Like maybe I'm trying to overcome an objection with like this line of messaging and it's just like I keep hitting a wall and it's not working. And maybe that's why I'm feeling exhausted there too. Like maybe they need to hear something else from me. Maybe I need to say it in a different way. So probably one of those two things, maybe both, honestly, because I think it definitely can be both of those at the same time. But yeah, I think it's really important to be like what you said, Shantae, is like, it just is a thing and it's just part of the process. I think that unfortunately, that is the industry we're in right now a bit, that there just is a trust gap. I think there's just been so many fractures of trust on a big level that we've seen like over time recently. And I think that, we just have to be having that conversation, not because we suck or because people don't understand us or whatever, but because as a whole, that's afloat, and so finding the ways to overcome that feel aligned, feel good, that you're actually seeing some movement and some shifts from is really important. Steph said it's so hard not to take it personally. 100%. I mean, listen, we're human. We're going to sometimes, but this is why I love data, because it at least kind of brings you back to that. So it's like, okay, I'm taking it quite personally and I can like see what's actually happening here. And like both of those can live together, but you kind of need something to like knock you out of it sometimes, because if not, it's just such a rabbit hole to go down. But I think we'll all still go there sometimes. Shantae said, yes, appreciate that perspective. Feels very affirming. Like the behavior makes sense given the state of the industry right now. 100%. That's what I'm saying to everyone. Like if they're like, oh, I'm feeling more objections right now. I'm like, yeah, I mean, like that. Yes, it's true. And that to me, like that's just kind of the game of business sometimes. Like I'm sure that will swing back at a certain point too. I don't think like these kind of things last forever, but I think right now, we've had some like big industry kind of credibility busters, in the last, 6-9 months or something like that. Right. And I think it's very much alive sort of right now. And there will be a time where that is less alive, or maybe like a lot of the people who were doing super untrustworthy things have kind of exited and whatever. And that's not as big of a thing, but I think it's just kind of being willing to like ride the waves where like right now this feels important. Right now there's like a credibility / trust thing that is afloat. And so yeah, like can I just be smart and adaptable to that instead of kind of feeling like that it will always be here, because I don't think it will be. Okay, what else do I want to say about that? Yeah, so it's so interesting because I was having a call with a friend this morning, and she basically needed to see like what was actually happening in her sales process. Like, she was saying to me, like, I think it could be this, I think it could be this, I think it could be this. And I'm like, but like, what's actually happening in your funnel? And she was like, I don't know. Right. And I'm like, this is the thing, right? You're trying to apply all of this logic to something, and we actually just need to see what's happening. And so it's like really helpful to see that like a lot of times our guess is wrong. Like that's what I said to her too. I'm like, what you even probably think it's going to be is not what it's going to be. And it, often turns out that way. And so I think it's just helpful to be like, okay, like my audience is buying from an illogical place, I am probably making what I think is logical meaning for it, maybe, but that's also rife with all of my own stuff and personalization and everything. And so I really need a place to come that depersonalizes it. So that's the first piece I wanted to talk about. I think it's really, really important. I think data is a game changer for your mindset. I think it's a game changer for how you do your sales process. And I think it's a game changer for making sense of the illogical. Right. So that's thing one. Lots more to say here. Right. But that's thing number one. Steph said, it's like the stock market, bull and bear markets will come and go, but those who stay in it will see the ROI. 100%. If you can ride the tough times, you get the good times, right? Lucy said, I'm kind of jumping in, so this is way off topic, and I'm not quite sure where we're at yet. But on the flip side of that, how would you recommend doing your own research to make sure someone is credible? I feel like I come across a lot of people I consider working with, but the copy is really similar between people and it feels hard to distinguish, if that makes any sense. Yes, Lucy, I'm going to grab this. Hold on. Yeah, I'm going to grab that and I will answer that for sure. It's okay. It's a little off topic, but so relevant to just the trust thing for sure. Jess said, I've been shocked how often my guesses are wrong because I'm like usually always right. LOL, just kidding, right? But that's how we feel as business owners, right? We kind of have this bias where we're like, of course I know my audience, of course I'm right. And then we make a guess and we're like, oh, yeah, no, I wasn't even in the ballpark, right? And I think that can kind of be disorienting sometimes, and it can also be really helpful because we're like, okay, I just can't go based on this like, oh, logically it makes sense, but they're blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like there's more to that story. So I want to talk about something else. And Lucy, I think this goes into what you're asking a little bit, but then I'll answer that question specifically. But I also want to talk about where like energy and connection come into play into this, right? Because then there's like the data piece of like the illogical sales process, and then there's like the energy and connection piece. And here's what I think is happening in our industry. I think many people in their sales process will kind of disconnect and put themselves on a pedestal and really try to sell from this pedestal, like I'm perfect and unreachable place, right? And what I think can happen there is that if you personally then feel like you're imperfect and missing something, it's really easy to emotionally buy here. So again, it's like that illogical thing, right? It's like this person is selling that they have it all figured out. Everything is perfect for them. I feel really imperfect. I feel super uncertain. And so I'm going to make an emotional buying decision here, right? Like so normal. So what happens all the time. But I think it's important to name that because just as much as like, yes, we want to look at like the illogical pieces, we want to see like, yeah, okay, that is why I've made some of these choices, maybe, or invested in something that like, you know, I'm like in hindsight, wasn't that credible or whatever, but it's like, yeah, because it gets to this kind of like guru pedestal sort of thing, and they come across with such confidence. And if you're in a place that's feeling really lacking in your confidence, then it's so easy to like hit purchase on that. It's like that emotional thing, like they got it, they will fix this, right? And you know, I think that gets so confusing in our space then too, because it can seem like that's how we're supposed to sell. Right. So it's like, okay, well, like that's what I've bought from, that's what I see working. That's just how I'm supposed to sell. And I think that can create so much tension for people, like so much tension for people, because number one, a lot of people don't actually like selling like that. And it doesn't always attract the best clients actually, because, you know, they're like not always in the best place when they've bought. And then two, a lot of people don't feel like they can even sell from that place. Or go to like that, you know, like unreachable status, because at this stage in their business, that doesn't feel true to them, or that doesn't feel like where they're at, you know, to be like, oh, I've got it all down. I've got it perfect, blah, blah, blah. Right. And so I think this can cause a tremendous amount of confusion in terms of both like, who can I trust to buy from when I'm like buying from that emotional place, but also like, what do I need to do in my sales process? Like I see how an element of that works. Is that the only way I can sell? Does that make sense to anybody? Let me know if I'm making sense there, but it's like, I think we see that I'm perfect thing working so well. I think most people have bought that. And so they're like, well, that worked for me kind of thing, you know? And then I think we can feel pressured that like, that's how we're supposed to sell too. So then it's like interesting because it's almost like there's like a ton of imperfect people walking around pretending to be perfect. And then we wonder why we have a trust issue in our industry. Like that's probably why. And which is maybe like a whole other fucking conversation that I was like, maybe this was 2 live streams, but we'll table that one. But that point I want to make is like the illogical buying, right? But here's what's important from that I want to share is, yes, that can work in its own way because it's emotionally driven. And again, sales are emotionally driven. However, I do not believe that when I look at data across the board from students in Measure Maximize, clients, friends that are bringing it to me, all of that kind of stuff. When I look at data, what I see by and large is that connection, like real connection, tends to work, right? So yes, the guru mentality does work in some ways, but I think it is very much based on a lot of traffic and not necessarily great conversions. Okay. And I think it's also bought on how deeply you go into that emotional appeal of like, I am perfect, you are imperfect, I shall help you. Right. Like, I think, that really depends. And so, but what I want to say is like, again, when I look at data, when I'm like behind the scenes in people's businesses, when I'm seeing what their conversion rates are, all of that kind of stuff, I really, really, really do believe by and large, real connection, right, is what fosters the best conversions. And so when you are trying to disconnect and put yourself on a pedestal, again, I'm not saying nothing about that works, but I do not think that's ultimately giving you the best conversion rate. I think it might make you feel good. It might make you look good. It creates some of that emotional buying, but I do not think by and large, the data supports that is the smartest option. Steph said, absolutely, there's a need to balance being relatable and empathetic, not too far removed from where clients are and showing a solution and what's achievable. Yeah, totally. Jess said, what do you think the difference is between aspiration and perfection? I mean, I think aspiration is, the difference to me is like, what is the manufactured like reality behind it to a certain extent, right? Like a lot of the people that are selling that I'm guru, I'm perfect, are doing that really strategically. It's not because they're just ultimately trying to like truly share their life and show you what's possible and da da da. Like it's a very strategic play, right? They're like, I'm going to make myself look as good as possible and tell you what is wrong with you so that you will sign up for my thing. Like I think you would know, by and large, because it's very intentional. Like the curated perfection is very intentional, I think, which is different than like aspiration, which is like, hey, I've created some like amazing shit and I'm like excited to share with you and I'm excited to tell you the good parts and the bad parts and the like, that feels really different for me. Some people are living amazing, like I feel like I have the best life in business. It's funny, I went to this mastermind thing recently and I said this thing and I was like, oh gosh, like God, it felt so good to say that out loud because it's so true. And what I said about a lit up life is I was like, honestly, I love this business so much. There's not a fucking thing I want to change. And like, so that to me, like, that's true. That's not me being like, I am perfect. Right. But like, I can say that while saying, so that's super aspirational to feel that excited about your business. And I can say there are plenty of issues in my business and plenty of trade-offs I'm making and right. And I think that's different where a lot of the people that have kind of that, like, I'm guru thing are like, I have no problems, right? Like I do what I want. I always do it perfectly. I take no accountability. I have no transparency. I have like, there's so much different nuance to that. One, I think feels like strategic and manufactured, and one is like multi-layered and there's good and there's bad. And there's, lots to being aspirational, some of which is being real, Stuff like curated perfection is something buyers are seeing more clearly, especially since the Instagram trend of Instagram versus reality. Yeah. I think the thing that's hard though, is that like, I think even when we see curated perfection, sometimes we're still so emotionally pulled in by it that we buy, right? Like, even if we know it's curated, there is just, and this is what I'm like wanting to name today, there's just this emotional piece around a purchase like this that is sometimes hard to stop. It's almost like you can know you shouldn't eat the cookies or something, but there's like this emotional pull on a really bad day. You're eating cookies or having a glass of wine or like insert whatever thing. So sometimes, even though we know curated perfection is the thing, we can spot it, there's still this part of us that's like, yeah, but what if this time they really do have all the answers? It's like that emotional pull. And so we have to know that if we're not selling like that, we are still working against a pretty strong emotional pull to that curated perfection. I think that's what we're saying, which is like, again, why you should study your data, because you can strategically work around it. And then two is also why I really want us to say like real connection actually does convert better. But if it's like curated perfection or just like another sales page, like honestly, I think the curated perfection is going to perform better. But if it's curated perfection versus real connection, I think that's where shit gets different, right? Like I really do. Jess said yes. Jess says interesting perspective. It feels in the market that people are buying from a more guarded place. Yeah. I think that's totally true about like people being more guarded and like being less trustworthy. I think 100%. I just think that emotional piece is really present sometimes for people still. And so the stronger emotion of being guarded might take over for some, where the emotion of kind of being like, oh my God, fix this for me might take over for others. I think it depends. I don't think there's like, one way that everyone's going to behave. I just think knowing that it's not always logical is really helpful. So the real connection piece, right? It does sell because again, like we're not always buying from that logical place of like, it seems like Jess has the exact answer to my problem. But if I feel connected to Jess, if I feel safe with Jess, if I feel like Jess gives a shit about me, I'm probably going to buy from her, right? Because that connection is stronger than some of the other stuff I'm seeing, or some of the other people that like won't give me the time of day or want to feel super, super removed. So I really feel like connection is the pathway here, where you're still applying to the illogical in sales, but you're not doing it in a way that feels kind of like super gross, or like your one option is to be like, I'm perfect, come buy from me, right? I think real connection is the name of the game. And when I look at data, I would say it is fully supported by that too. This is just an example, and I'm not saying everyone has to do this, but like, for example, you're going to convert better on a sales call than on just a page, almost inherently across the board. If you have sales calls, you're probably going to have a by far better conversion rate. Now, I'm not saying everyone has to do that, right? Because obviously, like sometimes that does not make sense for a certain program offer or whatever. But to me, that's just an example, right? Like you're going to convert better when it's human to human, connection to connection, because that is what creates that emotional connection that creates buyers, right? When I see my clients get on the call, share the real thing and not the perfect thing or whatever, I just see their conversion rates go up, right? So the point is, you can still have a lot of traffic, that still gets you sales when you're unreachable. Because if you have a lot of traffic, even if you have a small conversion rate, that works, right? And you can get sales that way because it really is appealing to a specific emotion. And the data does not inherently support that that's the best strategy. And I think that's just what's important to say, because it can feel like the thing, and that is not typically true. So where the mindset for this comes in that I think is important too is not trying to look a certain way from like an egoic place, but really looking at what's working in your business, what feels best to you, what feels most true to you, what are your people most responsive to. Like from that place, you're going to have such a better opportunity for not only better conversions, but I think also like beating the emotional appeal of like perfectionist kind of marketing, if that makes sense, right? Let me see what your questions are here. What are some ways you think we can develop real connection with our audience? Lots of thoughts on that, Lucy. Let me grab where I forget. Like here's an example, and I'm not saying this has to be it, but like, let me just give an example of kind of what I'm talking about. What you're asking, Lucy, too, is like my wait list is an example, right? Like, I'll make you a video. I'll answer monthly cute questions from people. We'll send out multiple videos each month. Like, even this live stream is a good example, right? Like, I get on here to connect with people, right? Most people I feel like that are, like at my stage of business or whatever, or maybe not even, I'm just, a lot of people are charging literally actually thousands. I was going to say charging hundreds, but I'm going to go with thousands per month for these kind of things, right? Like, if I just threw the videos I do for the wait list and that you can literally ask me a question, right? And this live stream in a membership, I could charge lots of money each month, right? Like, come do a live stream with me. It's a live, 60-minute training. You can ask your questions, you can interact, we can come submit your cues. Like a little place could be making bank off of that, right? But I'm like, I want to do it for free because I want to connect more. I want to connect with my people. And it's not necessarily a conversation of free versus paid, but it's like, where are you willing to kind of like go there with your people in a way that the industry does not always like support, or in a way that maybe makes you look a little bit different, or like not look as polished or unreachable or whatever, like, I think for me, that's something that like I've just had to let go of a long time ago. Like, I'm sure people look at my business and are like, yeah, but why do you get on live streams still every week? That makes no fucking sense. Or like, why would you not package those trainings and make a membership and get the 500 plus people on your wait list to pay you $99 a month, and you could make X amount off that, and right? Like, sometimes we have to do the thing that just creates connection, that just shows our audience we're like down to be there with them, that we want accessibility, that we want to interact with them. And again, I'm not like hating on any like strategy like that, or that's even a bad strategy, right? Like, if I had 500 people in a membership making $99 a month, like that's obviously a super solid strategy. But for me, it's just, I don't want to lose the connection in favor of that. Like, that means so much to me to like come on here every week. And so again, that's just an example, but I think like being willing to do the thing that doesn't make the most sense sometimes, or I heard someone say this recently and I really liked it, but it's like being willing to do the not scalable thing, like of like, oh, I want to like answer people's questions that are on my wait list, or I want to just like get on live stream and like talk to whoever wants to show up and like incentivize them for showing up, like, and not feeling like that makes you look desperate in any way, or that makes you look like you're not as good of a coach, or you're not setting good boundaries, or whatever like our industry says. It's like, oh, that just means I want to connect with people. That means I want to show up for my audience. That means like I really want them to come to me, so I'm kind of willing to go forward to them first. So I think like there are so many different ways to do that, and I'm not saying like I'm doing it in the right way. It's just like the way that feels good to me. But I think just like being a real person and putting yourself out there, and not kind of trying to come from that manufactured place of like, I shouldn't look like I want to connect. Like, when I tell people like, go do calls, go talk to your audience, there's always so much resistance to that from people, because they're like, yeah, but I don't want to like look like I'm brand new offering calls. And I'm like, who fucking cares? Like, if you're going to go get on 5 calls and 3 of those people want to buy from you, and you get the best market research that you could possibly get in your business, like, we have to let go of the what does it look like in favor of like, how connected does this make me? And I think that that's where we really apply to that emotional piece of the sales process, right? Of like, people are craving connections so much, and then like add on to it the fact that we're like not having as much trust in our industry. Like, what bridges the trust gap? Feeling like you know the person, feeling connected, feeling like you're not just being marketed to, but actually supported, talked to, served, right? So again, when we look at the data, it supports this. When we look at how it feels, I think from a buying perspective, I know I am always so much more supported buying based on connection versus, when I think someone is, coming from that pedestal place. And so I really do believe this is working in most ways in our industry. It's just that sometimes the perfection marking and pedestal stuff stands out the most. And so just wanting to kind of be a voice to say, I don't actually think that's what's working best, even if it's sometimes what stands out the most. And it's also not something we all have to do if it does not feel good to us. What I think we have the opportunity to do is recognize why that's working. Oh, that works because people buy from an illogical emotional place often. Okay, cool. How else can I do that in a way that feels true and aligned and of service and impactful, right? Okay, amazing. I can foster connection. And so there are a million ways to do that, but I really, really think that's so important. And I think that's what bridges that gap, right? Of like, I'm probably going to buy from emotion, but if I can feel really connected, that's a great way to foster that emotional play, like to foster that emotional connection that makes it feel safe to buy, that creates trust. So let me know if that makes sense. I think there's like a lot there and a lot I wanted to say. So I know that was a bit all over the place, but biggest takeaways are like, data helps you figure out how to make the illogical and emotional in a sales process logical and how to depersonalize it. 2, I think, just because it's something you're seeing online a lot, it doesn't always mean it's the best strategy. But if you can understand why that strategy is working, it can be so much better. Like, oh, I understand why people buy from the guru mentality because they're buying from an emotional place of feeling da da da. Like, it just doesn't feel like a secret, or why she has something you don't have or whatever. It's just like, oh, that fucking makes sense. People buy for really emotional reasons. I totally see that. Like, you can land that. It's so nourishing to be like, oh, that just makes sense. And then 3, that does not mean you have to sell that way, right? You can sell in other ways that bridge connection and feel good to people while still applying to the emotional aspect of sales. You do not have to be like this rigid robot, right? Would love for you to speak to not being marketed to while still being able to effectively sell on social. It's a hot topic right now per previous comment about all posts looking the same. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with marketing in general, right? But I think when it feels like manipulative is the difference, right? When it feels like I'm trying, like what we were saying, curated perfection, where I'm trying to manipulate, everyone into thinking that I am perfect, and thus that I have all of their answers and I think is different than I'm going to market because I believe in my thing and I want to connect with people around my thing and I want to talk to people around my thing. And I feel so like passionately about this thing that I want everyone to know about it. And I'm going to share as much as I can about it. And I want to get in it with my audience and connect with them about it. Like, I think those have different energies. And so marketing in and of itself, I don't think is bad at all. Right. Like, I believe in measure maximize so much, like we were saying earlier. Like, I will talk about that shit all the time. I really do feel like it is an absolute answer and like game changer for people's businesses. And like it's so different to talk about it from that like passionate connective place versus like, if you don't have data, you're a peasant and you suck and your business is going to come crashing down and come to me, Miss Perfect, to fix it. I'm kidding. But like, basically, you know what I mean? Like, I really think it's so much about like, what is the energy behind it? What are you bringing to it? Are you strategically trying to manipulate someone into buying from that like really negative emotional place because you see it work? Or are you really like bringing your own connective energy to it? You're a mess. Question, how do you use data to wrap your mind around the non-linear buying process we're seeing? I think the thing is like, sometimes data is even still best guess. You know what I mean? Like, we have the data and like best guess is it's this thing and we test it. That's how everything works. Like, even if you're doing like a science experiment or whatever, like you can be like, okay, we got this information. Now, best next hypothesis is this. Let's test the theory. Next best hypothesis is this. Let's test the theory. Oh my God, I cannot speak. So all that to say, like, I think it's about being open to the fact that like there's iterations with it. So, the buying process is non-linear. There might be several things that you're testing over time. And I think that can be really frustrating as an entrepreneur because we kind of just want to be like, okay, like there should just be one thing and I fix it and whatever. But the market is constantly changing how, like we're talking about the trust problem right now. I wasn't talking about that a year and a half ago. You know what I mean? Like shit just changes. And so I think, being willing to see it as like, these are hypotheses I'm testing, and every time I test it, I get closer to it. And the market is always changing. And so data is just there to like live with you and support you as you go through that, as the market changes. And I think like just wrapping your mind around the fact that it's always evolving is really helpful. Like, this is like just like an aside, but for example, like when Measure and Maximize first launched, when we first launched Dateable, that sales page converted so well, like so good. And then Jen and I have been looking at the data because that's what we do. Like we get our dashboards every day and look at them, and the sales page conversion has just been going down. And it's really interesting because it's like you almost want to ignore that. You want to be like, no, our sales page just converts really well. What else is it? Right. And it's like, but at the end of the day, like, it's not a huge red flag. It's not like completely tanked, but also like if I look at it now when it's a yellow or beige flag, as opposed to later, that's really helpful. But it's like not getting too attached to it looking one way or it being one way forever. So it's like, yes, that converted really well in December. And what has changed since then? What else do people need to hear? What else do we need to say? What are they craving different? Like, it's always going to evolve, but data should be the part that's there to support you in a changing market and environment, but it's not, like so hard and fast. And I think that's what we have to wrap our brains around, right? Shante said that makes sense. I like how the data informs what's working through within those tests. Exactly. Does M&M course work for non-course based businesses? I'm trying to conceptualize how it would work for private coaching. Yeah. We have a lot of people that use it to track private coaching, like kind of same thing. Like, how many, like you'd want to track your funnel, right? Like how many people land on this call booking page? Of those, how many people book calls? Blah, blah, blah. Like there's more. To that, actually, Jen just made this like insane awesome dashboard for like call conversions and stuff. I don't think she's put it in Measure Maximize yet, but I think we're going to add that shortly. But yes, like totally appropriate for non-courses as well. Yeah. Okay. I want to go back and answer Lucy's question from earlier because I feel like that's important and I want to make sure we don't lose that. She said, jumping in off topic, but on the flip side of that, how would you recommend doing your own research to make sure someone is credible? I feel like I come across a lot of people I can start working with, but the copy is really similar between people and it feels hard to distinguish, if that makes any sense. Yes, totally. I am always a big fan of like, ask them if you can talk to a couple clients. I think how people respond to that is very telling. If they're like, absolutely, here are 3 people, go talk to them. I think that's a really good start. If there is resistance to that, if there's like a ego shit that shows up in that, like, how dare you ask me for this thing, right? I think that's a huge red flag. I think if they're not willing to kind of like take the time to make those connections, that would be a red flag for me. Like, I don't even want your sale enough to like connect you with this, like different things like that, I think, are interesting to look at. I do not think everyone agrees with me, but that is my personal take. I think if I'm buying something that is, I'm just making this up, but let's say several $1,000s, I think it is so reasonable to be like, cool. And I'd love to talk to like 3 people that have experienced this before. One of my clients, when she hired me, just kind of figured out who my clients were based on like different things I've said and done. And she went and talked to a bunch of them. And I was like, that is so smart of you. Like, right on, like, go do your homework, go feel into that, like, go talk to them, see what they have to say. I think it's so valuable to feel like I'm allowed to want to research this. I'm allowed to want to find out more. I'm allowed to want to hear something. And I think you don't want to get so rigid with that, where you're like, I need someone that has like my exact business and is in the exact place I'm in and da, 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 da. But if you're like, I just want to like hear about other clients' experiences, like, I think that's really useful. I really do. And I think like not being afraid to do that, to ask for that, to see what the response is when you ask for that is really amazing. So that's one thing I would definitely do, even like who do they have as testimonials on their website? Can you go reach out to those people? Like, really neat. Can you Google their name? Like it's so silly, but I think it's something we don't do. Like, can you Google like Lacey Sites reviews? Like maybe nothing comes up, maybe something does, I don't know, but it's like just taking it one step farther to kind of like do those pieces of research, I think is really valuable and important. And I think the industry kind of wants to make that wrong. Like we're like, oh my God, don't look any further. How dare you? But I don't think that's true. I think it's like absolutely like, how can you be someone that does the research and hire someone who supports you in that? So that's the first thing that comes up for me. If you're like, I just can't spell the difference, and it seems like everybody else, like the difference is what was their client experience like. And if you can go talk to people and find that out, I think that can be really supportive. And again, I think if there's a lot of resistance to you doing that, that might tell you something too. So that would be my take on that. But I hope this was helpful. Again, I know it kind of jumped around a lot, but sales are illogical in large part. And there are ways to kind of like appeal to that without manipulating that, right? To do it in a way that feels good without having to do it in a way that feels super gross. And ultimately, when you do it in a way that feels good, I just see that the data supports that is most effective. So I hope that helps. I hope that just like reminds us that in a season where trust is, a little fractured in our space, there is plenty of stuff that is still working. There are plenty of ways to still make sales in a way that feels good, that you don't have to do the thing that feels shitty to you, or to the person on the other end. So I appreciate you guys being here as always. I feel like I haven't said this in like years. But since I mentioned it today, if you are not on the wait list yet and you want to be on the wait list for one-on-one coaching, remember you can join me there. And if you do, you can submit questions each month. I answer 3 questions every month. You get access to the ability to ask questions, as well as the videos from all of the past ones I've done, which are a lot at this point. So yeah, if you aren't on the waitlist and want to be, it's alituplife.com/waitlist. Yeah, feels fun to just share that. I'm like, I haven't talked about the waitlist like that in like, I don't know. Yeah, like 2 years or something. But anyway, would love to have you guys there if you aren't already there. If you have an interest in one-on-one, obviously no pressure to just like be there for the sake of it. But yeah, we may be opening a spot later this summer. I'm not entirely sure. That might not happen, but it is a possibility. So and we will open some more intensives as well. So if that's something that has been on your mind and you want to be on the wait list, we'd love to have you. So thank you guys as always for being here. I hope you have a beautiful week, and I'll see y'all next Monday. Bye guys.